No nurse could stand the Mafia boss until a simple woman performed a miracle. The massive bedroom seemed to swallow all light, thick velvet curtains drawn against the afternoon sun. Amelia Brooks stood at the foot of an ornate four-poster bed, her white nurse's shoes silent against the plush carpet. The man before her was a far cry from the fearsome figure she'd heard whispered about in the hospital halls. Luca Romano lay sprawled across silk sheets, his muscular frame racked with tremors. Sweat darkened his black t-shirt, plastering it to his chest. His olive skin had taken on an unhealthy pallor, but even in his weakened state, power radiated from him like heat from a furnace. His dark eyes snapped open, focusing on her with predatory intensity. "Get out." The words came as a guttural growl, his Italian accent thickening with anger. Before you continue listening, please let me know where in the world are you watching from today. Now back to the story. Amelia merely raised an eyebrow, setting her medical bag on the bedside table. "Mr. Romano, I'm Nurse Brooks. I've been assigned to your care." She kept her voice professionally neutral, ignoring how his presence made the air feel charged and heavy. "I don't need a fucking nurse." He tried to push himself up, but his arms trembled with the effort. Frustration flashed across his sharp features before he could mask it. "Your fever suggests otherwise." Amelia pulled out her thermometer, maintaining eye contact. She'd dealt with difficult patients before. This one just happened to be a notorious crime boss. "Do you know who I am?" His tone promised consequences, but the effect was somewhat ruined by the way he collapsed back against the pillows, chest heaving. "Yes, you're my patient." She stepped closer, unfastening her stethoscope. "And right now, you're a very ill patient who needs medical attention." His laugh was harsh, mirthless. "You've got balls. I'll give you that." His eyes raked over her, assessing. "But you're either very brave or very stupid." "I'm neither. I'm just doing my job." Amelia pressed the stethoscope to his chest, noting how his breath hitched at the cool metal. His heart was racing, skin burning hot through the thin fabric of his shirt. "Deep breath, please." To her surprise, he complied, though his glare could have melted steel. She worked methodically, checking his vital signs while he watched her with that unnerving intensity. His pulse thrummed strong and fast under her fingers when she checked his wrist. "Your hands are cold," he muttered, almost accusingly. "Better for bringing down fevers." She pulled out medication from her bag. "These will help with the—" His hand shot out, fingers wrapping around her wrist. Despite his weakness, his grip was like iron. "I don't take anything I haven't personally verified." Amelia met his gaze steadily. "These came directly from your family physician, but by all means, verify them. While you're doing that, I'll get a cool compress for your fever." Something flickered in his eyes. Surprise. Maybe even a hint of respect. His fingers loosened, but didn't let go entirely. "You're not afraid of me." It wasn't a question, but she answered anyway. "Fear doesn't help anyone heal, Mr. Romano." The silence stretched between them, broken only by his labored breathing. She could feel his pulse still racing where his fingers pressed against her skin, though whether from fever or fury she couldn't tell. Finally, he released her wrist. In the heavy quiet that followed, Amelia went about her tasks, hyper-aware of his eyes tracking her every movement. The powerful Mafia boss might be temporarily bedridden, but he was far from harmless. She could feel the barely contained violence in him, like a caged tiger watching its keeper. Yet as she pressed a cool cloth to his forehead, she caught something else in his expression. A crack in that icy exterior, a flash of vulnerability quickly hidden. He was used to being in control, and this illness had stripped that from him. No wonder he was lashing out. Amelia gathered her medical supplies, exhaustion weighing heavy on her shoulders after hours of tending to her difficult patient. The grandfather clock in the corner struck midnight, its deep chimes echoing through the massive bedroom. She needed sleep, a shower, and distance from those penetrating dark eyes that seemed to see right through her. "I'll be back in the morning to check your vitals," she said, keeping her voice professional despite her fatigue. "Try to rest, Mr. Romano." His silence was more unnerving than his earlier threats. She felt his gaze burning into her back as she walked to the bedroom door, her steps quickening with each passing moment. The hallway offered no relief. Two men in dark suits materialized from the shadows, their broad shoulders blocking her path. The taller one, a man with a jagged scar across his jaw, spoke first. "Going somewhere, Miss Brooks?" "Home," she replied, trying to step around them. Neither moved. "My shift is over." "There's been a change of plans." The second guard's voice was quieter, but no less menacing. "Boss wants you to stay. We've prepared a room." Amelia's heart hammered against her ribs. She turned back toward the bedroom, where Luca lay propped against his pillows. His face was expressionless, but his eyes glittered with dangerous intent. "Mr. Romano, I have other patients. I can't—" "Your schedule has been cleared." His voice, though weakened by fever, carried absolute authority. "You'll stay here until I no longer require your services." A chill ran down her spine. She thought of her empty apartment, her cat being looked after by her neighbor, the normal life she'd built after losing her fiancé. All of it suddenly felt very far away. "And if I refuse?" His laugh was soft, menacing. "That would be unwise, Nurse Brooks." The guards shifted closer, a subtle reminder of her position. Amelia's nursing training had taught her to remain calm in crisis situations. But this was different. This wasn't a medical emergency. It was imprisonment. "Fine," she said, proud that her voice remained steady. "Where's my room?" The scarred guard gestured down the hallway. "This way." As they led her through the mansion's winding corridors, Amelia took in her surroundings. Priceless artwork adorned the walls, crystal chandeliers cast dancing shadows, and thick carpets muffled their footsteps. Everything spoke of wealth and power, but it felt cold, threatening. Her assigned room, though luxurious, felt like a cage. A four-poster bed dominated the space, draped in rich burgundy fabrics. Fresh flowers sat on the dresser, and a suitcase, her own, she realized with growing unease, had already been retrieved from her car. "Someone will bring you when the boss needs you," the quiet guard informed her before they left, the door closing with a decisive click. Alone at last, Amelia moved to the window. The estate sprawled out below, its manicured gardens now shadowy and forbidding in the moonlight. Beyond the high stone walls, city lights twinkled tantalizingly. So close, yet completely out of reach. She pressed her forehead against the cool glass, trying to steady her nerves. How had a routine nursing assignment turned into this? She'd known Luca Romano was dangerous. His reputation preceded him. But she hadn't expected to become a prisoner in his home. A sharp knock interrupted her thoughts. Before she could respond, a familiar voice came through the door, rough with fever but commanding nonetheless. "Nurse Brooks." Luca's tone brooked no argument. "Come to me. Now." Amelia's knuckles grazed the heavy wooden door before pushing it open. The bedroom was dimly lit, with only a single lamp casting long shadows across the ornate furniture. Luca lay in his massive bed, his muscular frame seemingly diminished against the dark silk sheets. His eyes, though glazed with fever, tracked her every movement like a predator. Your timing needs work, he muttered, his voice hoarse. She approached the bed, her medical kit clutched in front of her like a shield. I came as soon as you called, Mr. Romano. His jaw tightened at her professional tone. Sweat beaded on his forehead, and his skin had a sickly pallor that concerned her. As she reached for his wrist to check his pulse, he jerked away. Don't touch me. I need to take your vitals. Amelia kept her voice steady, refusing to be intimidated. It's my job. Your job? He laughed, but there was no humor in it. Your job is whatever I say it is, Nurse Brooks. Despite his protest, she grabbed his wrist. His skin burned against her fingers, but his pulse was strong and regular. Too strong for someone supposedly battling a severe illness. Your temperature is elevated, but your vitals are surprisingly stable. She frowned, studying his face. Are you sure this is purely physical? His dark eyes narrowed. What else would it be? Sometimes, emotional stress can manifest as physical symptoms. She pressed the back of her hand to his forehead, noting how he tensed at her touch. Trauma, grief, anxiety, they can all cause real physical reactions. Get out. His voice was deadly quiet. No. The word surprised them both. Amelia straightened her spine, meeting his glare. Something's wrong, and it's my responsibility to help you, even if you won't admit what's really going on. Luca's hands fisted in the sheets. You don't know what you're talking about. I think I do. She sat on the edge of the bed, ignoring how he stiffened at her proximity. Your body's fighting something, but it's not an infection or virus. This started suddenly, didn't it? After something triggered it? Stop. The word was barely a whisper. Was it an anniversary? A memory? She pressed on, recognizing the signs she'd seen in other patients, in herself after losing her fiancé. When was the last time you actually dealt with your emotions instead of burying them? I said stop! His roar echoed through the room. He lurched forward, grabbing her arm, but his grip was weak, his hands shaking. Amelia didn't pull away. Instead, she watched as something cracked in his expression. The feared Mafia boss seemed to crumble before her eyes, his breathing ragged. It's been 5 years, he said, his voice breaking. 5 years since they took her from me. Since I found her... He cut himself off, releasing Amelia's arm to run a trembling hand over his face. The vulnerability in his eyes struck her deep in her chest. For a moment, she saw past the ruthless exterior to the wounded man beneath. His pain was familiar, the kind that ate you alive if you didn't face it. You've been carrying this alone, she said softly. His laugh was bitter. Who else would I trust? In my world, weakness gets you killed. It's not weakness to grieve, Mr. Romano. She reached out, hesitating before placing her hand over his. It's human. He stared at their joined hands, something raw and desperate crossing his features. The mighty Mafia boss looked lost, haunted by ghosts she could almost see reflected in his dark eyes. Luca's fingers dug into the silk sheets, his knuckles white with tension. You think you understand? His voice was low, dangerous. You think because you've seen a few patients break down, you know what this is? Amelia remained steady, though her heart hammered in her chest. The massive bedroom suddenly felt too small, too intimate. Moonlight filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting strange shadows across Luca's face. "I understand loss," she said quietly. "I understand what it does to people." His laugh was harsh, cutting through the air like broken glass. "Loss? You don't know the first thing about my kind of loss." He pushed himself up, swaying slightly. Despite his weakness, his presence filled the room. "Have you ever watched someone you love die because of your own choices? Because of trust misplaced in the wrong people?" The raw pain in his voice made her breath catch. This wasn't the cold, calculating mafia boss anymore. This was something else entirely. A man haunted by his past. Her name was Isabella. The words seemed to tear from his throat. She was everything. Pure, untouched by this world. His eyes grew distant, lost in memories. I thought I could protect her. I thought my power, my name, would be enough. Amelia's hand trembled as she reached for her water glass on the bedside table. The crystal caught the moonlight, sending prisms dancing across the walls. "What happened to her?" "They used her to get to me." His voice dropped to a whisper. "My own people, the ones I trusted most." He ran a shaking hand through his dark hair. "They took her, tortured her, sent me pieces." He stopped, his breath coming in sharp gasps. The silence that followed was deafening. Amelia could almost feel the weight of his grief pressing down on them both. She thought of her own loss, clean, quick, a robbery gone wrong. This was different. This was calculated cruelty. "When I found her," Luca's words faltered. For a moment he looked young, vulnerable. "She was still alive. Just barely. She died in my arms, trying to warn me about who had betrayed me." Amelia's medical training kicked in as she noticed his increasing distress. His pulse was racing, skin clammy. "Mr. Romano—" "I hunted them down," he continued, as if she hadn't spoken. "Every single one. Made them suffer like she suffered." His eyes met hers, and the darkness she saw there made her blood run cold. "But it didn't bring her back. Nothing will ever bring her back." She wanted to reach out, to offer some comfort, but something in his expression stopped her. The vulnerability was already being replaced by walls of steel and ice. "And now?" she asked softly. "What happens now?" His face hardened, the mask of the mafia boss sliding back into place. "Now you leave." His voice was flat, emotionless. "And if you're smart, you'll forget everything I just told you." "Mr. Romano—" "Get out." The words weren't loud, but they carried enough force to make her flinch. "Don't make me tell you twice." Amelia stood slowly, her legs unsteady. The weight of his confession pressed against her chest, making it hard to breathe. She'd wanted to understand what was causing his illness, but this was more than she'd bargained for. At the door, she paused, looking back at him. The mighty mafia boss sat rigid in his bed, staring out the window, his profile sharp against the moonlight. The pain was still there, visible in the tension of his shoulders, the clench of his jaw. Without another word, she slipped out into the hallway, closing the door softly behind her. Her mind spun with the horror of what she'd heard, with the realization that the man she'd been caring for wasn't just dangerous. He was damaged, perhaps irreparably. The days melted into each other within the confines of Luca Romano's mansion. Amelia found herself settling into a routine, though nothing about caring for a mafia boss could ever truly feel normal. She monitored his vitals, administered his medications, and changed his bandages with steady hands that betrayed none of the turmoil she felt inside. His confession about Isabella had changed something between them. The air felt charged whenever they were in the same room, heavy with unspoken understanding. Luca's rage, once explosive and unpredictable, had simmered down to a quiet intensity that was almost more unnerving. On this particular morning, Amelia entered his room to find him sitting up in bed, reading through what looked like business documents. His color was better, the fever that had plagued him finally breaking. The sunlight streaming through the windows caught the sharp angles of his face, softening them somehow. "Your temperature's been stable for 48 hours, she said, approaching his bedside with her medical kit. "That's a good sign." Luca didn't look up from his papers, but he didn't tell her to get out either. Progress, she supposed. As she wrapped the blood pressure cuff around his arm, she noticed the tension in his muscles had eased somewhat. He allowed her to work without the usual resistance. "Blood pressure's improving too," she noted, recording the numbers in her chart. When she reached for his wrist to check his pulse, his skin was warm and dry. No more cold sweats. His fingers twitched slightly at her touch, but remained still. Throughout the day, Amelia moved through her tasks with practiced efficiency. She noticed small changes in his behavior, the way he no longer turned away when she entered the room, how he would sometimes watch her work with an unreadable expression. Once, when she nearly stumbled carrying fresh linens, his hand had shot out to steady her. He'd withdrawn it immediately, but the brief contact left her skin tingling. The evening brought a peaceful quiet to the mansion. Amelia carefully balanced the dinner tray as she entered his room. The lights were dimmed, casting everything in soft shadows. Luca sat in an armchair by the window, dressed in black silk pajamas that probably cost more than her monthly salary. "Your dinner, Mr. Romano," she said, setting the tray on the side table. He turned from the window, his dark eyes finding hers. The usual coldness was still there, but something else lingered beneath it, something that made her breath catch. The silence between them stretched, filled with an electricity she couldn't explain. Amelia busied herself arranging the dishes, aware of his gaze following her movements. Her hands trembled slightly as she poured water into his crystal glass. When she straightened, she found him still watching her, his expression contemplative. The moment hung suspended between them, delicate as spun glass. His eyes seemed to soften, the hard lines around his mouth relaxing. For a brief instant, Amelia caught a glimpse of the man beneath the monster. Someone capable of deep feeling, of vulnerability. But then, like sun disappearing behind storm clouds, the moment vanished. His face closed off, the walls slamming back into place. "Leave," he said quietly, turning back to the window. The word wasn't harsh or angry like it had been before. It was simple, almost gentle, but it was still a dismissal. Amelia nodded, though he wasn't looking at her anymore, and walked to the door. As she closed it behind her, she could still feel the lingering weight of that shared moment, wondering what it meant. Amelia lingered in the doorway of Luca's study, watching as he conducted business with his men. Even in his weakened state, he commanded attention. His voice, though quieter than usual, still carried authority that made his soldiers stand straighter, their faces tense with respect and fear. She was supposed to be checking his medication schedule, but found herself mesmerized by the duality of the man before her. The same hands that had trembled with fever days ago now moved with precise control as he gestured over territory maps spread across his mahogany desk. His dark eyes, which had shown such raw pain when speaking of Isabella, now cut through his men with calculating coldness. One of his soldiers, Marco, she thought his name was, approached with a tablet, showing Luca something that made his jaw clench. "These numbers are unacceptable," Luca said, his voice low but sharp enough to make Marco step back. "Find out who's skimming from the docks. Make an example of them." Amelia's stomach turned at the implications, but she couldn't deny the flutter in her chest when Luca's gaze briefly met hers across the room. There was something different in the way he looked at her now. Less hostile, more considering. The change unsettled her as much as it intrigued her. Another man stepped forward, speaking in rapid Italian. Luca listened, his fingers drumming against the desk's surface. Even from her position, Amelia could see the slight tremor in his hand, a remnant of his illness that only she seemed to notice. He was pushing himself too hard, too soon. As if sensing her concern, Luca's eyes flicked to her again. This time, something softened in his expression, just for a moment. It was gone so quickly she might have imagined it, but the memory of his vulnerability during their late-night conversations made her certain it had been real. The meeting continued, and Amelia forced herself to focus on her actual duties. She reviewed his chart, noting his improving vital signs while trying to ignore the way his presence seemed to fill the room. The dangerous allure of him was impossible to dismiss. The way his silk shirt stretched across his broad shoulders, how his voice could shift from menacing to velvet soft in seconds. The sun had long since set when Amelia finished her evening rounds. The mansion's halls were quiet except for the occasional footsteps of guards. Was heading back to her room when voices from Luca's private office caught her attention. "The Calabrese family is getting bold," a gruff voice said. She recognized it as belonging to Vincent, Luca's most trusted enforcer. "They're spreading rumors about your weakness, boss, saying the great Luca Romano is finished." Through the crack in the door, Amelia saw Luca standing by the window, his profile illuminated by moonlight. His shoulders were tense, his hands clasped behind his back. "Let them talk," he said, but there was an edge to his voice that betrayed his concern. "It's not just talk anymore," Vincent pressed. "They're moving shipments through our territory, testing our responses. The other families are watching, waiting to see if you're still strong enough to hold what's yours." Luca turned, and Amelia caught a glimpse of the rage simmering beneath his controlled exterior. "Then we remind them why they feared me in the first place." He moved to his desk, leaning over it with both hands braced on the surface. "But we do it smart. We can't afford mistakes right now." "And if they make a move before you're fully recovered?" The question hung in the air, heavy with implications. Amelia held her breath, suddenly very aware of how precarious Luca's position was. The illness hadn't just weakened his body. It had created cracks in his carefully constructed empire. His enemies were circling like sharks, sensing blood in the water. Luca's response was too quiet for her to hear, but the tension in the room was palpable. She backed away silently, her heart racing with the weight of what she'd witnessed. The man she'd been caring for wasn't just fighting to regain his health. He was fighting to maintain his grip on power itself. Amelia gathered her belongings, her hands trembling as she stuffed her medical supplies into her bag. The night's revelations about Luca's vulnerable position within the crime family had left her unsettled. She needed space, needed to think clearly away from the suffocating atmosphere of the Romano mansion. The hallway was dimly lit as she made her way toward the main entrance. Her footsteps echoed against the marble floors, each step bringing a mix of relief and inexplicable reluctance. Before she could reach the grand foyer, a shadow detached itself from the darkness. Luca stepped into her path, his presence filling the space between them. His recovery had brought back his imposing strength, evident in the way he moved with predatory grace. Without warning, his hand shot out, fingers wrapping around her arm. The touch sent sparks of electricity through her body. "You're not going anywhere," he said, his voice a dangerous whisper. His eyes, usually cold and distant, burned with an intensity that made her breath catch. There was something else there, too, an emotion she couldn't quite read, something that made her pulse quicken. "I need to leave," Amelia insisted, trying to keep her voice steady. "You're recovering well. You don't need me here anymore." But even as she said the words, she felt their hollowness. His grip tightened, not enough to hurt, but enough to assert his control. "That's not your decision to make." His other hand came up to brush a strand of hair from her face, the gesture startlingly gentle compared to his commanding tone. "You know too much now. You've seen too much." Amelia swallowed hard, very aware of his proximity, of the heat radiating from his body. "Are you threatening me?" A dark chuckle escaped him. "If I wanted to threaten you, there would be no doubt in your mind." His thumb traced small circles on her arm, the intimate gesture at odds with his words. "This is me protecting what's mine." "I'm not yours," she protested, but her voice lacked conviction. The way he looked at her made her feel claimed, marked in some indefinable way. "Aren't you?" His eyes traveled over her face, lingering on her lips. "You've been mine since the moment you walked into my bedroom, refusing to be intimidated by me. No one else has ever dared to challenge me the way you do." The tension between them crackled with electricity. Amelia knew she should pull away, should assert her independence, but her body refused to move. Luca's presence surrounded her, intoxicating and dangerous. "Go back to your room," he ordered softly, finally releasing her arm. "We both know you're not leaving." The certainty in his voice should have angered her, but instead, it sent a shiver down her spine. Amelia turned away, her legs unsteady as she walked back through the mansion's corridors. Each step felt heavy, weighted with the knowledge that he was right. She couldn't leave. Not now. Not when she was already so entangled in his world. In her room, she pressed her back against the closed door, her heart pounding against her ribs. The place where his fingers had gripped her arm still tingled, and she could still feel the ghost of his touch on her face. The chemistry between them was becoming impossible to ignore, a magnetic pull that grew stronger with each passing day. She moved to the window, pressing her forehead against the cool glass. The manicured gardens below were bathed in moonlight, beautiful and pristine, much like the facade that hid the dangerous reality of Luca's world. A world she was now irrevocably part of, whether she wanted to be or not. Sunlight streamed through the heavy curtains as Amelia checked Luca's vitals. His physical recovery was remarkable, his strength returning day by day, the color back in his face. But the emotional walls he'd built remained as impenetrable as ever. "Your blood pressure is much better today," she said, removing the cuff from his arm. Her fingers lingered for a moment on his wrist, feeling his steady pulse. "But you're still tense. The stress isn't helping your recovery." Luca pulled his arm away, his jaw tight. "I don't need a lecture on stress management." "No, but you need to talk about what's bothering you." Amelia sat in the chair beside his bed, meeting his cold stare with unwavering determination. "The nightmares haven't stopped, have they?" His eyes narrowed. "You're overstepping, nurse." "Isabella," Amelia said softly, watching his face harden at the name. "You mentioned her name in your sleep last night. Who was she, Luca?" The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Luca's hands clenched into fists, his knuckles white. Get out. Running from the past won't heal it, she pressed on, ignoring the warning in his voice. I know about loss. I know how it can eat you alive if you let it. You know nothing, he snarled, swinging his legs over the side of the bed. Despite his returning strength, the movement was still slightly unsteady. You're here to monitor my physical health, nothing more. Amelia stood her ground as he towered over her. I'm here to help you heal. All of you. And what makes you think you can fix me? His voice dripped with contempt. Because you lost someone too? Because you think you understand pain? He stepped closer, intimidating. You're just a nurse who's forgotten her place. My place? Amelia lifted her chin, refusing to be cowed. My place is right here, helping my patient recover, even when he's being stubborn and self-destructive. Something flickered in Luca's eyes. Surprise, maybe even respect. But it was quickly buried beneath his usual cold mask. You're playing a dangerous game, pushing me like this. I'm not playing any game, she said firmly. I've watched you fight your demons every night. I've seen how the memories torment you. You don't have to face them alone. Luca turned away, his shoulders tense. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken words. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, almost vulnerable. Alone is safer. Safer for whom? Amelia moved closer, close enough to feel the heat radiating from his body. For you? Or for the people you push away? He didn't answer, but she saw his hands trembling slightly. The mighty Mafia boss, brought low not by illness or enemies, but by the weight of his own past. I won't break, she said softly. And I won't run, no matter how hard you try to push me away. Luca turned back to face her, his expression unreadable. But there was something different in his eyes now. A crack in the armor, a glimmer of recognition. He saw in her the same stubborn strength he possessed, the same unwillingness to back down. You should be afraid of me, he said, but the words lacked their usual bite. Perhaps, Amelia agreed, but I'm not. And I think that's what really bothers you. The tension between them shifted, transformed into something electric and uncertain. Luca studied her face, as if seeing her truly for the first time. The respect in his gaze was unmistakable now, mixed with something deeper, more complex. He didn't want to be alone anymore. She could see it in the way his shoulders slumped slightly, in the way his eyes lingered on her face. But admitting it, even silently, was its own kind of surrender. The mansion grew quiet as evening settled in, shadows lengthening across Luca's bedroom. Amelia adjusted his pillows, noting how his usual rigid posture had softened slightly. His eyes were distant, focused on something beyond the ornate walls of his gilded prison. Isabella, he said suddenly, the name hanging in the air between them. She wasn't just someone I loved. She was my salvation. Amelia's hands stilled on the bedding. She remained silent, afraid any word might break this rare moment of openness. I met her when I was different, younger, more ruthless, if you can believe it. A bitter smile crossed his face. She worked at a small cafe I used to visit. Never showed an ounce of fear, even when she figured out who I was. Like someone else I know. His eyes flickered to Amelia's face, then away again. She made me want to be better. Made me think I could be more than just my father's son. More than another monster in a suit. Amelia sat carefully on the edge of the bed, maintaining a respectful distance. What happened to her? Luca's jaw clenched, his hands fisting in the sheets. I trusted the wrong people. Let them get close. Let them see my weakness. His voice dropped to a whisper. They used her to get to me. Made me watch as they... He broke off, pain etching deep lines around his mouth. Without thinking, Amelia reached out, covering his clenched fist with her hand. His skin was warm beneath hers, and she felt the slight tremor running through him. I couldn't save her, he continued, his voice raw. I had all this power, all these men at my command, and I couldn't save one person. The one person who mattered. It wasn't your fault, Amelia said softly, feeling his pain echo her own memories of loss. Wasn't it? His laugh was harsh, empty. I brought her into this world, made her a target, and when they came for her, I was too weak to stop them. Amelia squeezed his hand gently. Love isn't weakness, Luca. In my world, it is. He turned to look at her, his eyes dark with remembered pain. Everything I touch turns to ash. Everyone I care about ends up dead or broken. Is that why you push everyone away? She asked, understanding flooding through her. Why you built these walls? The walls keep people safe. From me. From this life. His fingers uncurled slowly beneath hers. But you keep pushing back, breaking through. Why? The vulnerability in his question made her heart ache. Because I see past the monster you pretend to be. I see the man who's hurting, who's carrying guilt that isn't his to bear. Luca's free hand came up, brushing a strand of hair from her face. The touch was gentle, at odds with everything she knew about him. You remind me of her sometimes. The way you stand up to me, the way you see through the lies I tell myself. The moment stretched between them, fragile and charged. Amelia felt the weight of his confession, the rare trust he'd shown in sharing this piece of himself. But she also felt the danger that lurked beneath the surface, the darkness that had claimed Isabella's life and could just as easily claim hers. Exhaustion began to show in the lines of Luca's face, his body still weak from his illness. His eyes grew heavy, the emotional toll of their conversation evident in every line of his body. Sleep, Amelia murmured, trying to withdraw her hand, but his fingers tightened briefly around hers. Stay, he said, his voice already thick with approaching sleep. Just stay. She watched as his breathing evened out, his features relaxing in sleep. For the first time since she'd known him, he looked peaceful, the weight of his past temporarily lifted. But even as sympathy and something deeper stirred in her heart, she couldn't forget the danger he represented. The world he inhabited was still as deadly as ever, and this moment of vulnerability didn't change that fundamental truth. Amelia sat in the growing darkness, her hand still held in his, caught between the man she was beginning to understand and the violent reality of his world. The evening shadows lengthened across Luca's bedroom as Amelia helped him with his evening routine. His strength had been returning steadily, but he still needed assistance with certain tasks. Tonight, there was a different energy in the air, thick with unspoken tension that had been building for days. Amelia's hands trembled slightly as she helped him change his bandages. His skin was warm beneath her fingers, and she couldn't help but notice how his muscles tensed at her touch. The silence between them was charged, heavy with something neither of them dared to name. "You're healing well," she said softly, trying to maintain professional distance, but her voice betrayed her, coming out breathier than intended. Luca's eyes followed her every movement. They weren't the cold, threatening eyes she'd first encountered. Now they held a different kind of danger, one that made her heart race for entirely different reasons. "Thanks to you," he replied, his voice low and rough. His hand caught hers as she finished with the bandage, his thumb brushing across her wrist. The touch sent shivers down her spine. Amelia tried to step back, to put some distance between them, but Luca moved to stand. His legs, still weak from days of illness, buckled slightly. She reached for him instinctively, and he grabbed her arms to steady himself. The momentum brought them chest to chest, their faces inches apart. Amelia could feel his breath on her lips, could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes. Time seemed to stop, the world narrowing to just this moment, just them. "Amelia," he whispered, and the way he said her name made her knees weak. His hand came up to cup her face, thumb tracing her bottom lip. She knew she should pull away. This man was dangerous. He was everything she should run from. But the gentleness in his touch, the vulnerability she'd glimpsed beneath his harsh exterior, it drew her in like a moth to flame. Their lips brushed, soft at first, almost accidental. The touch was electric, sending sparks through her entire body. For a moment, they both froze, suspended in that brief contact. Then something snapped. Luca's hand slid into her hair, pulling her closer as his mouth claimed hers fully. The kiss was fierce, desperate, filled with all the tension that had been building between them. Amelia's hands fisted in his shirt, torn between pushing him away and pulling him closer. He tasted like darkness and desire, like danger and salvation all at once. His tongue swept into her mouth, and she couldn't hold back a soft moan. The sound seemed to drive him wild, his grip tightening, his body pressing her back against the wall. The rational part of her mind screamed that this was madness. He was a mafia boss, a man who dealt in death and violence. She was his nurse, meant to heal him and nothing more. But rational thought had no place here, not with his hands setting her skin on fire, not with his kisses making her forget everything but this moment. Her fingers traced the muscles of his chest, feeling his heart thundering beneath her palm. He growled against her mouth, the sound sending heat pooling in her belly. This was wrong, so wrong. But it felt like the most right thing in the world. Just as suddenly as it began, Luca wrenched himself away. His chest heaved with heavy breaths, his eyes dark with desire and something that looked like fear. "I warned you," he growled, but there was no anger in his voice, only raw need and conflict. Amelia stood there, her back still against the wall, her lips tingling from his kisses. Words failed her as she stared at him, her whole body humming with unfulfilled desire. She knew she'd crossed a line, knew there was no going back from this moment. The pull between them was magnetic, undeniable, impossible to ignore. Luca stepped back, his jaw clenched tight, creating distance between them. His eyes, moments ago burning with passion, now held a familiar coldness. "Get out," he ordered, his voice rough. Amelia's heart still raced from their kiss, her lips tingling with the memory of his touch. She squared her shoulders, standing her ground. "No." His eyebrows shot up, surprise flickering across his features before anger replaced it. "What did you say?" "I said no." Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "You can't keep pushing people away, Luca. Not after what just happened." He turned away from her, his shoulders tense. Nothing happened. Nothing that matters. You're lying. Amelia moved closer, careful not to touch him. I felt it. You felt it too. That wasn't nothing. You don't understand what you're getting into, he growled, still not looking at her. Whatever this is, it can't happen. I won't let it. Heat rushed to her cheeks. Don't I get a say in this? He whirled around, his eyes blazing. No, you don't. This is my world, my rules, and I'm telling you to leave. But Amelia saw past his anger, saw the fear hiding beneath. She'd spent enough time with him now to recognize when he was retreating behind his walls. I've seen who you really are, Luca. Behind all this, she gestured at his rigid posture, his cold expression. I've seen the man who hurts, who feels, who needs. Then you're a fool. His words cut like ice. What you think you've seen is weakness, nothing more. It's not weakness to feel something. She took another step closer. The air between them crackled with tension. It's not weakness to let someone in. His hands clenched into fists at his sides. The last person I let in died. Is that what you want? To end up like her? The pain in his voice made her heart ache. I'm not her, Luca. And you're not the same man you were then. A knock at the door interrupted them. Marco, one of Luca's most trusted men, entered without waiting for a response. His eyes took in the scene, Luca's tension, Amelia's proximity, the charged atmosphere in the room. Boss, Marco said, his tone carefully neutral. There's a situation that needs your attention. Luca nodded sharply. We're done here anyway. He looked at Amelia, his expression unreadable. Aren't we? She lifted her chin. For now. As she moved to leave, Marco caught her arm. His grip wasn't painful, but it was firm enough to make his point clear. Miss Brooks, he said quietly, remember your place here. You're here to help the boss recover, nothing more. It would be unfortunate if you forgot that. The threat in his words was subtle but unmistakable. Amelia glanced back at Luca, but he had already turned away, dismissing her presence entirely. She pulled her arm free from Marco's grip and left the room, her heart pounding. The reality of her situation hit her with crushing force. She wasn't just dealing with Luca anymore. She was dealing with his entire organization. Every move she made was watched, every interaction analyzed. The kiss they'd shared had changed everything. She wasn't just his nurse now. She was a potential liability, a weakness in his armor that his enemies could exploit. His men would be watching her closely, making sure she didn't step out of line. But even as fear curled in her stomach, she couldn't bring herself to regret it. She'd seen beneath Luca's mask, felt the passion he kept locked away. That kiss had confirmed what she'd suspected. There was more to him than the cold-blooded mafia boss everyone feared. She was in his world now, whether she liked it or not, and there was no going back. Amelia sat in the back of Luca's sleek black Mercedes, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. The leather seats creaked as Luca shifted beside her, his presence overwhelming in the confined space. 2 armed guards sat in front, their weapons visible beneath their expensive suits. Remember, Luca said, his voice low and commanding. Stay close to him. Me. Don't speak unless spoken to. His eyes, dark and intense, fixed on her. These people aren't like the men at the mansion. They're snakes, waiting for any weakness. She nodded, trying to calm her racing heart. This was her first time leaving the mansion since she'd arrived, and she hadn't expected it to be for a mafia meeting. But Luca had insisted she come, claiming he still needed medical supervision. The car pulled up to an exclusive restaurant in the city's wealthiest district. Through the tinted windows, Amelia spotted more armed men stationed around the building. The driver opened Luca's door, and he stepped out, his movements fluid despite his recent illness. He extended his hand to help her out, and she felt the strength in his grip. Inside, the restaurant was empty except for a group of men seated at a long table. They all stood as Luca entered, a sign of respect that seemed more like fear. Amelia noticed how they watched him, like wolves sizing up their alpha. Romano, a heavy-set man with graying hair, greeted them. "We were beginning to think you'd forgotten about us during your recovery." Luca's lip curled slightly. "Salvatore." He pulled out a chair for Amelia before taking his seat at the head of the table. "My health is no longer your concern." The tension in the room thickened. Amelia felt every eye on her, measuring her, judging her presence. She kept her face neutral, remembering Luca's warning. "And who is this lovely addition?" Salvatore's eyes lingered on her too long. "My nurse," Luca said flatly. His hand found her knee under the table, a possessive gesture that sent warmth through her body. "Now, shall we discuss business?" The meeting progressed like a carefully choreographed dance. Words were weapons here, each statement loaded with double meanings. Luca commanded the room effortlessly, his voice never rising above a controlled tone, yet his authority was absolute. Amelia watched him transform. This wasn't the man she'd nursed back to health, the one who'd kissed her with such raw need. This was Luca Romano, the Mafia boss who'd built an empire on blood and fear. "The shipping routes belong to me," Salvatore was saying, his face flushed with anger. "Your father agreed. My father is dead," Luca cut him off. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. And those agreements died with him. One of Salvatore's men reached inside his jacket. In an instant, Luca's guards had their weapons drawn. Amelia's breath caught in her throat. "Careful," Luca said softly. The quiet in his voice was more terrifying than any shout. "You wouldn't want to make a mistake you can't take back." Salvatore raised his hand, and his man slowly withdrew it empty. "Perhaps we can reach a new agreement." "Perhaps." Luca's thumb stroked Amelia's knee, a gentle touch that contrasted sharply with his cold demeanor. "But understand this. Cross me again, and there won't be another meeting." The threat hung in the air like smoke. Amelia saw the other men shift uncomfortably, saw the fear in their eyes. This was Luca's true power, not just the violence he commanded, but the promise of it. When they stood to leave, Luca kept his hand at the small of her back. The gesture was protective, possessive, marking her as his in front of his rivals. She felt the weight of it, understood what it meant in this world of power and violence. The meeting had lasted less than an hour, but in that time, everything had changed. She'd seen Luca in his element, seen how he wielded power like a finely honed blade. The man who showed her glimpses of vulnerability was also capable of bringing hardened criminals to heel with just his presence. The ride back to the mansion was silent, but Amelia could feel the tension radiating from Luca. His jaw was clenched, his eyes fixed on the passing city lights. The meeting had changed something between them. She'd seen a side of him she couldn't unsee. "You're afraid of me now," he said finally, his voice low. It wasn't a question. "No," Amelia replied, surprised to find it was true. "I'm afraid of what you're capable of. There's a difference." His hand found hers in the darkness of the car. The touch was gentle, at odds with the man who just threatened a room full of criminals. "You should be afraid of both." Back at the mansion, the atmosphere had shifted. Luca's men moved with renewed purpose, their movements sharp and alert. Something was brewing. She could feel it in the air, see it in the way they watched the perimeter. Later that evening, as she brought Luca his medication, she found him in his study, surrounded by papers and maps. His recovery was nearly complete, but she still insisted on maintaining his medical routine. "Salvatore's pushing boundaries," one of his captains was saying. "He's been meeting with the Calabrese family." Luca's eyes darkened. "Watch them both. I want to know every move they make." His gaze shifted to Amelia as she approached with his pills. "Leave us," he ordered his men. When they were alone, he pulled her closer, his hand wrapping around her waist. The possessive gesture sent a shiver through her body. "You shouldn't be involved in this," he murmured against her hair. "I already am," she reminded him, setting down the medicine. "You made sure of that." His grip tightened. "I need you safe." The words carried weight, an admission he wouldn't have made weeks ago. "Things are going to get complicated." "They already are." Amelia turned to face him, finding herself trapped between his body and his desk. "You can't keep me in a bubble, Luca. I saw what happened today. I know what's coming." His eyes searched her face, looking for fear or rejection. Instead, he found understanding. It scared him more than anything else. "This isn't your world, Amelia. You don't belong here." "Then why did you bring me to that meeting?" she challenged him, her hand resting on his chest. She could feel his heart beating steadily under her palm. "Because I needed them to see." He trailed off, his expression conflicted. "To see what?" "That you're mine." The words came out rough, possessive. "That hurting you means war." The admission hung between them, heavy with implications. Amelia knew she should be terrified by his words, by the darkness they promised. Instead, she felt a thrill run through her body. "Your enemies are watching," she said softly. "They'll use me against you." "They'll try." His hand cupped her face, thumb tracing her lower lip. "But they don't understand what that means. What I'll do to protect what's mine." The tension between them crackled, electric and dangerous. Amelia saw both sides of him now, the tender man who kissed her with such care, and the ruthless boss who commanded an empire of violence. They weren't separate people. They were both equally Luca. A knock at the door interrupted them. "Boss," a voice called urgently. "We've got movement on the east side." Luca's expression hardened instantly, the tenderness vanishing behind a mask of cold authority. But his touch remained gentle as he stepped away from her. "Stay in the house," he ordered, "no matter what happens." Amelia watched him transform, watched the man she'd been caring for become the Mafia boss everyone feared. The duality of his nature should have repelled her, but instead, she found herself drawn deeper into his world, unable and unwilling to escape its pull. The manila folder felt heavy in Amelia's hands. She'd found it by accident while organizing Luca's medical records, tucked away behind years of documentation. Police reports, newspaper clippings, and photographs spilled across her lap as she sat in the quiet of her room. Isabella Rossi. The name appeared again and again, accompanied by a beautiful woman with dark hair and fierce eyes. In every photo she looked alive, vibrant, until the last one. A crime scene photo showed her crumpled form, blood staining her designer dress. Amelia's hands trembled as she read the police report. Murder, they'd called it. An execution-style killing that bore all the hallmarks of an inside job. But what made her blood run cold was the name listed as the primary suspect. Marco Salvatore, Luca's former right-hand man, and the same person she'd seen at yesterday's meeting. The pieces started falling into place. Luca's illness, his emotional walls, his brutal reaction whenever Salvatore's name was mentioned. She gathered the documents, her heart pounding against her ribs as she made her way to Luca's study. He was alone, reviewing papers at his desk. When she entered without knocking, his eyes narrowed. "What is it?" Amelia dropped the folder on his desk. Photos of Isabella scattered across his documents, and she watched as all color drained from his face. "You let him live," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "The man who killed her, who betrayed you, and you let him live." Luca's jaw clenched, his knuckles white as he gripped the edge of his desk. "Where did you find these?" "That doesn't matter." Amelia stepped closer, refusing to back down. "You sit across from him at meetings. You negotiate with him. How can you—" "Be very careful with your next words." Luca cut her off, his voice dangerously low. "No!" Amelia slammed her hands on his desk. "You don't get to threaten me. Not about this. I've watched you suffer, watched this eat you alive from the inside out. And now I find out that the man responsible is still walking free? Still doing business with you?" Luca stood slowly, his presence filling the room with cold fury. "You think I don't know what he did? You think I don't see her face every time I look at him?" His words came out as a growl. "Isabella was everything to me, and he took her away because she knew too much. Because she was going to expose his side deals with our enemies." "Then why is he still breathing?" Amelia demanded. "Because death would be too easy." Luca's eyes blazed with a hatred that made her step back. "I want him to live knowing that every breath he takes is because I allow it. Every deal he makes, every dollar he earns, it's all because I permit it. And when the time is right, when he's finally rebuilt everything he lost." A cruel smile twisted his lips. "I'll take it all away. Slowly. Piece by piece." The coldness in his voice chilled Amelia to her core. This was the man everyone feared, the ruthless boss who played with lives like chess pieces. "This is killing you," she whispered. "This need for revenge. It's destroying you from the inside." "It's keeping me alive," he corrected her. "The day I let go of this hatred is the day I become weak. And in my world, weakness gets you killed." Amelia stared at him, really seeing him for the first time. The man she'd been caring for, the one who showed her tenderness and vulnerability. He was just as much a facade as the cold-blooded Mafia boss. Both were real, both were Luca, and both were equally dangerous. "Is that what I am?" she asked quietly. "Another weakness?" His expression softened for a fraction of a second before hardening again. "You're something far more dangerous." He stepped around the desk, backing her against the wall. "You make me want things I can't have, a life I can't live." The truth hung between them like a blade. Amelia felt tears burning in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Everything she thought she knew about him had shifted, leaving her unsteady and unsure. The night wrapped around the Romano mansion like a velvet cloak, broken only by the soft glow of security lights. Amelia couldn't sleep, her mind still churning with the revelations about Isabella's murder. The silence felt heavy, oppressive. A crash shattered the quiet. Gunfire erupted from multiple directions, the sharp crack of bullets piercing through windows. Glass exploded inward as dark figures rappelled down from the roof. Amelia's heart thundered in her chest
as she ducked behind her bed, adrenaline coursing through her veins. Heavy boots thundered down the hallway. She could hear Luca's men shouting, returning fire. The mansion transformed into a war zone in seconds. Her door burst open. Amelia grabbed the nearest weapon she could find, a heavy lamp, ready to defend herself. But it was Luca who charged in, his eyes wild with fury. Blood streaked across his white shirt, though she couldn't tell if it was his own. "Move!" he ordered, grabbing her arm. His touch was rough but purposeful as he pulled her against him. More gunfire erupted outside her room, and he shielded her with his body, pressing her into the corner. Two men in tactical gear burst through the doorway. Luca's reaction was instantaneous. He fired twice, each shot finding its mark with deadly precision. The men crumpled to the floor without a sound. "Stay close," he growled, leading her toward the door. His gun remained ready, his movements precise and lethal. This wasn't the sick man she'd been nursing. This was the Mafia boss in his element, dangerous and deadly. They moved through the hallway like shadows. Every few steps, Luca would pause, listening. The sounds of fighting echoed throughout the mansion. Screams, gunfire, breaking glass. Twice more they encountered attackers. Each time Luca eliminated them without hesitation, his actions swift and brutal. An explosion rocked the building's foundation. Smoke began filling the corridor. Amelia's eyes watered as Luca pulled her closer, pressing a handkerchief to her face. "Breathe through this," he commanded. They reached the main staircase, but more attackers were coming up from below. Luca shoved her behind a marble pillar, just as bullets sprayed their position. He returned fire, his expression cold and focused. "You're surrounded, Romano," a voice called out. "Give up the girl, and we might let you live." Luca's laugh was chilling. "You should have brought more men." He moved with deadly grace, each shot finding its target. Bodies fell on the staircase as he advanced, showing no mercy. Amelia watched in horrified fascination as the man she'd seen vulnerable and broken now dealt death with terrifying efficiency. More of Luca's men arrived, flanking the attackers. The firefight intensified, but the tide had turned. Luca's fury was unstoppable, his presence commanding as he directed his forces. The attackers began retreating, leaving their dead behind. When the last shot faded, the mansion fell into an eerie quiet. Smoke hung in the air like fog, and the metallic scent of blood mixed with gunpowder. Luca turned to Amelia, his eyes still blazing with battle fury. "Are you hurt?" His hands moved over her, checking for injuries. Despite the violence she'd just witnessed, his touch was gentle. "I'm okay," she managed, though her voice shook. Around them, Luca's men secured the mansion, checking bodies and clearing rooms. The full scope of the attack became clear. This had been a coordinated strike meant to eliminate Luca while he was supposedly weak. "They came for you," she whispered, realization dawning. "They thought you were still sick." "They came for both of us," he corrected, his voice hard. "They knew you were here, knew what you meant." He stopped himself, jaw clenching. "Get her somewhere safe," he ordered his men. "And find out who talked. Someone gave them our security details." As his men led her away, Amelia looked back at Luca. Blood stained his clothes, but he stood tall, powerful. The man who had been her patient was gone, replaced by someone far more dangerous. And she was now caught in the middle of his war, whether she wanted to be or not. The mansion's medical room smelled of antiseptic and gunpowder. Amelia's hands trembled as she cleaned the bullet graze on Luca's shoulder, the white gauze stained red. His shirt lay discarded on the floor, torn and bloodied from the fight. "Stop moving," she ordered, trying to keep her voice steady. But her professional demeanor cracked when she saw the dark bruises forming across his ribs. "These need to be wrapped." Luca sat rigidly on the examination table, his jaw clenched. The fury from the attack still radiated off him in waves. His men were sweeping the property, hunting for any remaining threats, but the tension hadn't left his body. "It's nothing," he growled, but winced when she pressed against his ribs. "It's not nothing." Amelia reached for more bandages. "You could have internal bleeding. You need—" "What I need," he cut her off, grabbing her wrist, "is to find out who betrayed us." His grip was tight, desperate. "They knew about you, about your schedule, your room location." His voice dropped dangerously low. "Someone close to us gave them that information." Amelia tried to pull away, but he held firm. "Luca, you're hurt. Let me help you first." "They could have killed you." The words came out raw, pained. For the first time since the attack, real emotion cracked through his cold exterior. "If I hadn't reached you in time." "But you did." She placed her free hand over his, feeling the tremors running through him. "You protected me." His eyes met hers, dark with something that made her breath catch. "I'll always protect you." He released her wrist but caught her fingers with his. "But you can't stay here. This world, my world, it's too dangerous." The words hurt more than they should have. Amelia knew he was right. She'd seen firsthand tonight how violent his life was, how quickly everything could turn deadly. She wasn't meant for this world of blood and betrayal. But leaving— "If I go, they'll find me," she whispered. "Your enemies know who I am now. They'll use me to get to you." Luca's expression hardened. "I could send you away, somewhere safe, with new papers, a new identity." The thought of running, of leaving everything, leaving him, made her chest ache. "Is that what you want?" "What I want?" His laugh was bitter. "What I want is to kill every person who dared threaten you tonight. What I want is to keep you locked away where no one can touch you." He reached up, his fingers brushing her cheek. "What I want is impossible." Amelia leaned into his touch, despite knowing she shouldn't. "Why impossible?" "Because you deserve better than this life, better than me." The vulnerability in his voice made her heart clench. "I'm a monster, Amelia. You've seen what I'm capable of." "I've seen a man protecting what's his." The words slipped out before she could stop them. Luca's eyes darkened. In one fluid motion, he pulled her between his legs, his hands gripping her waist. "Is that what you are?" His voice was rough, dangerous. "Mine?" Amelia's heart thundered in her chest. She should say no, should push away and run as far as she could. But the heat of his skin, the intensity of his gaze, held her captive. "You're not leaving," he murmured, one hand sliding up her back to tangle in her hair. "I won't let them take you from me. Not now, not ever." He pulled her closer until she could feel his breath against her lips. "You're mine now, Amelia. Your life, your heart, everything." His words were both a promise and a threat. "No one will ever touch you again. No one but me." Amelia knew she should resist, should fight against the possession in his words. But as his arms tightened around her, she realized the truth. She was already lost. Her world had narrowed to this moment, to this man, to the dangerous path she could no longer avoid. Amelia's fingers trembled as she held the documents she'd discovered hidden in Antonio's office. Her stomach churned as she read through them again, hoping she was wrong. But the evidence was clear. Phone records, meeting locations, bank transfers. Someone in Luca's inner circle had been feeding information to his rivals for months. She found Luca in his study, surrounded by the usual stack of paperwork. His recovery had been steady, but the dark circles under his eyes betrayed his exhaustion. When she entered without knocking, his head snapped up, eyes narrowing. "What is it?" he asked, voice sharp. Amelia's throat went dry. "I found these in Antonio's office." She placed the papers on his desk, watching as his expression shifted from annoyance to confusion, then to something far more dangerous. His fingers clenched around the documents, knuckles turning white. "Where exactly did you find these?" "Hidden compartment in his desk. I was looking for more medical supplies and—" "You had no right to go through his things." Luca's voice was deadly quiet. "Someone had to." Amelia's fear gave way to anger. "Your enemies knew exactly where to strike during the attack. They knew my schedule, the layout of the house, everything. And now I know why." Luca stood slowly, his chair scraping against the floor. The sound made her flinch. "Antonio has been with me for 15 years. Which makes this betrayal even worse." She forced herself to stand her. The ground as he circled the desk. "The transfers started 6 months ago, right after your first bout of illness." His hand shot out, gripping her arm. "Why were you investigating this?" "Because I care about what happens to you." The words burst from her before she could stop them. "Because I watched you nearly die in that attack, and I couldn't." His grip tightened painfully. "You could have been killed for finding this." "I'm more afraid of what will happen if I didn't." She met his gaze steadily, despite the fear coursing through her veins. "Antonio is planning something. These records show another meeting scheduled for tonight." Luca's expression turned murderous. He released her arm and reached for his phone, barking orders in Italian. Within minutes, heavy footsteps echoed through the hallway. 2 of his men appeared in the doorway. Luca spoke to them rapidly, his voice controlled but filled with barely contained rage. They nodded and disappeared. "Stay here," he ordered Amelia. "Luca, stay here." Each word was emphasized with deadly precision. She watched helplessly as he strode from the room, taking his fury with him. The silence that followed was deafening. Minutes stretched into an hour as she paced the study, jumping at every distant sound. Finally, the door opened. Luca returned, his white shirt spattered with blood. Behind him, she could hear shouting and the sound of struggle. "Bring him in," Luca commanded. Antonio was dragged into the study, his face beaten and bloody. His eyes widened when he saw Amelia. "You little bitch," he spat. "You did this?" Luca's backhand caught him across the face. "You don't speak to her." "She's made you weak," Antonio laughed through bloody teeth. "The great Luca Romano, brought low by a nurse." "No," Luca's voice was ice. "She made me see clearly." He pulled out his gun, the metal gleaming in the dim light. "You betrayed me, Antonio. After everything I gave you." "You gave me nothing." Antonio struggled against his captors. "I earned my place here, and then you let this woman change everything." The gunshot was deafening in the enclosed space. Antonio slumped forward, a neat hole in his forehead. Blood pooled on the expensive carpet.
Amelia couldn't move, couldn't breathe. She'd known Luca was capable of violence, had seen glimpses of his darker nature. But this cold execution, made it real in a way nothing else had. Luca turned to her, his expression unreadable. Blood stained his clothes, his hands, but his eyes were clear and focused. He'd killed a man who'd been like family to him, and he hadn't hesitated. "Now you see," he said quietly. "This is who I am. This is my world." Amelia's hands wouldn't stop shaking. She stood in her bathroom, scrubbing Antonio's blood from her skin, blood that had sprayed when Luca pulled the trigger. The water ran pink, then clear, but she couldn't stop washing. The knock at her door made her jump. "Go away," she called out, her voice trembling.
"Open the door!"
Luca's command carried through the wood, brooking no argument. She gripped the sink, staring at her reflection. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her skin was pale from shock. This wasn't the life she'd signed up for. She was a nurse, meant to heal people, not watch them die. The door handle rattled. "Amelia, now!" Taking a deep breath, she opened the door. Luca filled the frame, having changed into a clean black shirt. His face was impassive, but tension radiated from his body. "You can't hide from me," he said quietly. "I'm not hiding." She stepped back, creating distance between them. I need space." His jaw tightened. "Space isn't safe right now. Antonio might have had other allies." "That's exactly the problem." The words burst from her. "Every day here I'm surrounded by danger. People die, people get hurt, and you—" She gestured at him helplessly. "You kill without hesitation." "To protect what's mine." He advanced into the room, and she retreated until her back hit the wall. "Everything I do is to keep my empire, and you, safe." "I'm not yours to protect." Her voice shook. "I'm your nurse. That's all I was ever supposed to be." Luca's hand slammed against the wall beside her head. "You stopped being just my nurse the moment you walked into my bedroom that first night. You saw me at my weakest. You pushed past my walls. You made me feel—" He cut himself off, breathing hard. "Feel what?" she whispered. His dark eyes bore into hers. "Everything. You made me feel everything I'd buried after Isabella died." The mention of his murdered love made Amelia's heart clench. "And look what happened to her. Your world destroyed her." "That won't happen to you." His voice dropped, becoming dangerous. "I won't let anyone touch you." "You can't promise that." She pushed against his chest, but he didn't budge. "Your enemies will always come for me. I'll always be a target. And I can't live like that, Luca. I can't live watching you kill people, wondering if I'm next." His hand wrapped around her throat, not squeezing, just holding. "Don't ever say that," he growled. "I would burn this city to the ground before I let anyone harm you." "That's what scares me." She met his gaze steadily. "The depth of your violence. The way you lose control." "I never lose control." His thumb stroked her pulse point. "Everything I do is calculated. Every death serves a purpose. Antonio's betrayal couldn't go unpunished." "And what about the next betrayal? And the next death?" Tears stung her eyes. "How many people have to die before you feel safe?" "As many as it takes." His other hand came up to cup her face, the touch surprisingly gentle. "I won't apologize for protecting what matters to me.
And you, Amelia. His grip tightened slightly. You matter more than anything. The possessiveness in his voice should have frightened her. Instead, it sent heat coursing through her veins. This dangerous man, this killer, would tear apart anyone who threatened her. The thought was both terrifying and thrilling. I can't be responsible for more deaths, she whispered. Their deaths are on my hands, not yours. He leaned closer, his breath fanning across her lips. No one will touch you. No one will hurt you. Not while I'm breathing. She saw it then. The depths of his obsession, the way his entire world had narrowed to her. He would destroy everything, burn every bridge, eliminate any threat, just to keep her safe. The realization should have made her run. Instead, she found herself drawn closer to his darkness, like a moth to a deadly flame. Amelia stood at the window of her room, watching rain streak down the glass. The droplets distorted the view of Luca's carefully manicured gardens, making them seem wild and untamed. Like him, she thought. Beautiful, but dangerous. Her fingers traced the cool glass, following a raindrop's path. 3 weeks had passed since Antonio's execution. 3 weeks of sleepless nights, jumping at shadows, and trying to reconcile the gentle way Luca touched her with the ruthless efficiency of his violence. The memory of his hands, steady and sure as they held the gun, made her shiver. Those same hands had carefully brushed her hair back from her face last night when she'd fallen asleep in his study. How could someone be both tender and terrible? She moved away from the window, pacing the luxurious room that felt more like a gilded cage with each passing day. The silk sheets on her bed, the designer clothes in her closet, all of it spoke of Luca's wealth and power. All of it marked her as his. But what did that mean? To belong to a man who commanded death as easily as he commanded loyalty. Her medical training warred with her heart. She'd sworn to do no harm, to heal and protect. Yet here she was, falling for someone who dealt in pain and death. The rational part of her mind screamed that this was wrong, that she needed to run far and fast. But her heart raced every time he entered a room. It ached when she saw the shadows in his eyes, the weight of his position heavy on his shoulders. She wanted to heal more than his body now. She wanted to heal his soul. You're thinking too hard again. Amelia spun around. Luca stood in her doorway, his presence filling the room instantly. He'd loosened his tie, and the top buttons of his shirt were undone, revealing a glimpse of tanned skin. His eyes, dark and intense, fixed on her face. How can I not? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. After everything. He moved into the room, closing the door behind him. The soft click seemed to seal them in their own private world. Tell me what's going on in that head of yours. I'm trying to understand, she said, wrapping her arms around herself. How I can feel this way about you when I've seen what you're capable of. How my heart can want someone my mind says I should fear. Luca crossed the room in long strides, stopping just inches from her. She could smell his cologne, a mix of citrus and something darker, more dangerous. Do you fear me, Amelia? She looked up at him, studying the sharp angles of his face. I fear what you do. I fear what loving you might make me become. His breath caught at the word loving. His hand came up to cup her cheek, and she couldn't help leaning into his touch. I've never pretended to be anything other than what I am, he said softly. I won't change, not even for you.
I know. And she did. Luca was who he was, a man shaped by violence and power, by loss and betrayal. Expecting him to change would be like expecting a wolf to become a house pet. His thumb brushed across her bottom lip. But you're still here. I'm still here, she agreed, her voice trembling. God help me. I can't seem to walk away from you. Something fierce and possessive flashed in his eyes. His other hand slid around her waist, pulling her against him. Then stop fighting it, he growled. Stop fighting us. Amelia felt her resistance crumbling. The heat of his body, the intensity of his gaze, the way his touch made her feel both safe and dangerous. It was too much. Her hands fisted in his shirt as emotion overwhelmed her. I shouldn't want this, she whispered. I shouldn't want you. Luca's grip tightened. But you do. Just like I want you. Just like I need you. His voice dropped lower, rougher. You're in my blood now, Amelia. There's no going back. Amelia stood at the window of Luca's study, watching his men patrol the grounds with military precision. The estate had transformed into a fortress over the past few days, with additional security measures appearing hourly. Armed guards stalked the perimeter, their black suits stark against the manicured lawns. The peaceful facade of wealth and luxury couldn't hide the underlying current of violence anymore. Her fingers traced the cool glass, remembering the simple life she'd led before. Hospital rounds, coffee with friends, quiet evenings at home. It felt like a lifetime ago. Now her world revolved around bulletproof glass and security protocols, around a man who commanded an empire built on blood and fear. You're worried. Luca's voice came from behind her, deep and certain. She didn't turn around. Your men say the Calabrese family is making moves. They're gathering forces. Let them come. His footsteps were silent on the thick carpet as he approached. They've wanted this territory for years. They think I'm weak now. Are you? The question slipped out before she could stop it. His reflection appeared beside hers in the window, his expression hard. No. They mistake my patience for weakness. His hand settled on her shoulder, warm and possessive. Everything I've done has been calculated, including keeping you here. The admission sent a shiver down her spine. Is that all I am? Another calculation? Luca spun her around, his grip firm but not painful. His dark eyes blazed with an intensity that made her breath catch. You know better than that, he growled. You're the one variable I never planned for. The one person who saw past everything. Amelia's heart thundered in her chest. And look where it's gotten us. Your enemies are closing in. They'll use me against you, we both know it. They can try. His thumb traced her jawline, a gentle touch at odds with the violence in his voice. But they don't understand what they're dealing with. I'm not the same man I was when they killed Isabella. The name of his first love hung between them, heavy with history and pain. But for the first time, Amelia didn't feel its shadow. Luca's eyes were fixed on her, present and burning with determination. I was careless then, he continued. Young. Thought love made me invincible. His hand slid to cup the back of her neck. Now I know better. Love doesn't make you invincible. It makes you dangerous. Movement outside caught their attention. 3 black SUVs pulled through the gates, carrying more of Luca's men. The estate was becoming a powder keg, ready to explode at the slightest spark. I was a nurse, Amelia whispered, more to herself than to him. I helped people, saved lives. And now? Luca's question was soft but demanding.
She turned back to him, seeing the man who had captured her, the one who had shown her both tenderness and terror, the man she had inexplicably, inevitably, fallen in love with. Now I'm standing beside the most dangerous man in the city, watching him prepare for war. You could leave. The words seemed to cost him something to say. I would make sure you got somewhere safe. But they both knew it was an empty offer. She was too deep in his world now, too tied to him. The woman who had walked into his bedroom months ago, determined to heal him, had transformed into someone else. Someone who understood that sometimes love meant standing in the darkness with the person who needed you most. No, she said firmly. I'm exactly where I need to be. Luca's eyes darkened with possession and pride. He pulled her closer, his body solid and warm against hers. Outside, more men arrived. Weapons were distributed. Plans were made. The countdown to confrontation had begun, but in this moment, Amelia felt strangely at peace. She had chosen this, chosen him. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The night exploded in gunfire and screams. The Romano estate, once a symbol of power and luxury, had become a battlefield. Shattered glass littered the marble floors, and the acrid smell of gunpowder hung thick in the air. Amelia pressed herself against a wall, her heart hammering as bullets tore through the space where she'd stood moments before. Luca moved like a demon through the chaos, his movements precise and lethal. He'd shed his usual composed demeanor, revealing the ruthless killer that lay beneath. His gun barked repeatedly, each shot finding its mark with deadly accuracy. Bodies fell in his wake, but he didn't slow down, didn't hesitate. The Calabrese family had come in force, dozens of men storming the estate from multiple directions, but Luca had been ready. His men met the attackers with coordinated resistance, turning the manicured grounds into a killing field. The beautiful gardens where Amelia had once walked with Luca were now stained with blood. Stay close! Luca's voice cut through the chaos as he reached for her, pulling her behind him. His body became her shield as they moved through the mansion's corridors. The confidence in his movements gave her strength, even as the violence threatened to overwhelm her. An explosion rocked the building, and smoke began filling the hallway. Through the haze, dark figures emerged, guns raised. Luca reacted instantly, shoving Amelia into an alcove as he opened fire. The thunderous exchange lasted only seconds, but to Amelia it felt like hours. When silence fell again, Luca was still standing, though blood ran down his arm from a graze. The attackers lay motionless on the floor. He didn't even spare them a glance as he checked on Amelia, his eyes intense with concern. Are you hurt? His hands moved over her, checking for injuries. She shook her head, unable to find her voice. The woman who had once flinched at the sight of blood now stood steady amid carnage. Love had changed her, hardened her in ways she never expected. More gunfire erupted outside, followed by screams. Through the window, Amelia could see Luca's men pushing back the last of the Calabrese forces. The enemy was breaking, their coordinated attack dissolving into panic. It's almost over, Luca said, his voice grim. He kept one arm around her as they moved toward his study, where his top lieutenants would be coordinating the defense. They found Marco, Luca's second-in-command, directing men through a radio. His usually immaculate suit was torn and bloodied, but his eyes were alive with fierce satisfaction. Boss, they're running. The Calabrese leadership is trapped in the East Wing. Luca's expression hardened. Good. No one leaves alive. The next hour passed in a blur of violence and retribution. Luca systematically eliminated every threat to his power, every person who had dared to challenge him. Amelia watched it all,
understanding that this was the price of their love, the darkness that would always surround them. When dawn finally broke, the Romano estate stood silent. The bodies had been cleared away, the blood washed from the floors. But the cost of victory was written in the faces of the survivors, in the haunted looks and trembling hands. Luca found Amelia in his study, where she stood looking out over the grounds. The rising sun painted everything in soft gold, a beautiful contrast to the night's horrors. He approached her slowly, his presence both comforting and dangerous. "It's done," he said simply. "The Calabrese family is finished. No one will challenge us again." Amelia turned to face him, taking in the cuts and bruises that marked his face. He was still the most beautiful man she'd ever seen, even covered in the evidence of violence. "And what happens now?" Luca stepped closer, his hand coming up to cup her face. His touch was gentle, a stark contrast to the brutality he'd shown hours before. His eyes held hers, filled with an emotion that made her breath catch. "You're mine," he whispered, the words carrying the weight of a vow. It wasn't just possession he was claiming. It was devotion, protection, a promise of forever. The morning light filtered through the bullet-marked windows of Luca's study, casting long shadows across the Persian rug. Amelia stood at her usual spot by the window, watching as men cleared away the last remnants of the battle. The pristine gardens she'd grown to love now bore the scars of violence. Trampled flowers, broken statuary, and dark stains that would take more than rain to wash away. Her hands trembled slightly as she wrapped them around a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving her exhausted and raw. Every gunshot still echoed in her mind. Every scream still made her flinch internally. This wasn't the life she'd imagined for herself when she first stepped into Luca's mansion as his nurse. Behind her, Luca's men moved in and out of the study, delivering reports and receiving orders. Their voices were hushed, respectful, but carried the unmistakable tone of victory. They'd won. The Romano family had crushed their enemies, and their power was absolute once again. Luca sat at his massive desk, his presence commanding even in the aftermath of battle. His shirt was still stained with blood, some his, some not, but his movements were precise and controlled as he signed documents and issued commands. He looked up occasionally, his eyes finding her, checking on her. Amelia caught snippets of conversation. Territories secured, rivals eliminated, messages sent to other families. The business of death and power continued, methodical and cold. She wondered if this would be her life now, standing in beautiful rooms while men discussed violence in measured tones. A sharp pain in her palm made her look down. She'd gripped her coffee cup so hard that her nails had left crescents in her skin. The marks were red, angry, a physical reminder of the tension coursing through her body. "Everyone out," Luca's voice cut through the murmur of conversation. His tone allowed no argument, and within moments the room emptied. The sudden silence felt heavy, meaningful. Amelia heard his footsteps approaching, but didn't turn. She kept her eyes on the gardens, on the men moving bodies with practiced efficiency. Strong arms wrapped around her waist from behind, and she felt Luca's chest press against her back, solid and warm. "What are you thinking?" he asked, his breath tickling her ear. "I'm thinking about how different everything looks in daylight," she answered honestly. "How normal it all seems even. After." She couldn't finish the sentence. Luca's arms tightened around her. "This is my world, Amelia. The violence, the power. It's who I am." "I know."
And she did know. She'd seen it firsthand, had watched him move through chaos like it was his natural element. But where do I fit in this world? How do I reconcile the man who holds me like this with the one I saw last night? He turned her in his arms, forcing her to face him. His eyes, usually so cold and controlled, were intense with emotion. You fit wherever you choose to be. With me, preferably. His hand came up to cup her face, thumb brushing away tears she hadn't realized she'd shed. I know what I am, what I've done. But with you... He paused, searching for words. With you, I want to be more. Amelia leaned into his touch, feeling the calluses on his hands, hands that had dealt death hours ago, now touching her with such gentleness. The contradiction made her head spin. A distant explosion made her jump, but Luca held her steady. Just the cleanup crews, he explained softly. Destroying evidence. She nodded, letting out a shaky breath. The mundane explanation for such violence only highlighted her new reality. Everything had changed, yet nothing had. She was still here, still in his arms, still caught between fear and love. Luca pulled her closer, enfolding her in his embrace. His heartbeat was steady against her cheek, a rhythm that had become more familiar to her than her own. You're safe now, he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. The morning sun filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Luca's study, casting long shadows across the polished hardwood floors. Amelia sat in one of the leather armchairs, watching as Luca worked through a stack of papers. The quiet scratch of his pen against paper was oddly comforting, a mundane sound in a world that was anything but normal. 2 weeks had passed since the final battle, and life was settling into a new rhythm. The mansion's staff had grown used to her presence, no longer averting their eyes when she passed. They'd accepted her as Luca's woman, treating her with a mixture of respect and careful distance. You're staring, Luca said without looking up from his work. A small smile played at the corners of his mouth. I'm thinking, she corrected, running her fingers along the smooth leather of the armrest. About us. About all of this. This time, he did look up. His dark eyes found hers across the desk, intense and questioning. Having second thoughts? No, she answered honestly. Just adjusting. Everything's different now. Luca set down his pen and leaned back in his chair. The morning light caught the silver at his temples, a reminder of the stress that had aged him beyond his years. Different doesn't mean bad. No, it doesn't. Amelia stood, moving to the window. Below, in the gardens, workers were replanting the damaged flower beds, life continuing, growing over the scars of violence. But it's not simple either. She heard Luca's chair scrape back, his footsteps approaching. His reflection appeared beside hers in the window. Nothing worth having is simple. Your men still watch me, she said softly. Not just for protection. They're waiting to see if I'll break, if I'll run. They're protective of me, Luca admitted, his hand finding the small of her back. The last woman I loved was killed, Amelia finished when he trailed off. I know. But I'm not her, Luca, and you're not the same man you were then. He turned her to face him, his hands gentle but firm on her shoulders. No, I'm not. Because of you. His thumb traced her collarbone, a tender gesture that made her shiver. You saw past the monster everyone else sees. You weren't afraid to challenge me, to push back when I tried to control everything. Amelia reached up, touching the scar on his jaw, a reminder of the night she'd first treated him, when he'd been weak and furious at his own vulnerability. I was afraid. I just refused to let the fear win. A knock at the door interrupted them. One of Luca's men entered, his face carefully neutral as he delivered a report about territory disputes and rival families. Amelia listened as Luca issued orders, his voice taking on that cold, commanding tone she'd come to recognize as his business voice. When they were alone again, Luca pulled her close, burying his face in her hair. "This is who I am," he murmured. "A man who orders deaths over breakfast and signs business deals in blood." "I know who you are," Amelia said firmly, her hands sliding up his chest to rest over his heart. "You're the man who holds me at night when the nightmares come, who looks at me like I'm something precious, who's learning to trust again, even though it terrifies you." His arms tightened around her. "You make me want to be better." "Not better," she corrected. "Just more. More than the cold mask you show the world. More than the pain and violence that shaped you." Luca pulled back slightly, studying her face. His expression softened, showing that rare vulnerability that only she got to see. "How did you do it?" he asked. "How did you break through every wall I built?" "The same way you broke through mine," she answered. "One day at a time. One moment of trust after another." Sunlight streamed through the windows of their private balcony as Amelia leaned against the railing, watching the morning activities in the courtyard below. The mansion buzzed with its usual controlled chaos. Guards patrolling, staff hurrying about their duties, cars coming and going. But now it felt different, like home. Luca's arms wrapped around her waist from behind, his chest solid and warm against her back. "What's on your mind?" he asked, his voice still rough from sleep. "Everything," she admitted, leaning into his embrace. "The future, us, this life we're building." His grip tightened slightly, protective rather than possessive. "Having doubts?" "No," she turned in, his arms to face him. "Just realizing how far we've come. From that first night when you could barely look at me without snarling, to now." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "I was an ass." "You were hurting," she corrected, reaching up to trace the line of his jaw. "We both were. But look at us now." Below them, one of Luca's captains approached the mansion, flanked by 2 guards. Business as usual. Amelia had learned to read the signs, the way the men moved, the urgency in their steps, the subtle shifts in body language that meant trouble or routine matters. "You've adapted well," Luca observed, following her gaze. "Most women would have run screaming by now." "Most women haven't seen what I've seen. Haven't loved like I love." She met his eyes steadily. "This world, your world, it's part of who you are. And I accept all of you, Luca, the darkness and the light." He pulled her closer, pressing his forehead to hers. "You make me want to be worthy of that acceptance." "You already are," she whispered. "You don't have to change who you are. Just let me in. Keep letting me in." A knock at the balcony door interrupted them. One of the guards cleared his throat apologetically. "Boss, the Castellano family is here for the meeting." Luca straightened, his business mask sliding into place. But his eyes, when they met Amelia's, remained soft. "I'll be there in 10 minutes." The guard nodded and retreated. Amelia smoothed Luca's shirt collar, a gesture that had become habit. "Go. Be the big bad Mafia boss. I'll be here when you're done." "Always?" he asked, and beneath the simple word lay volumes of meaning. "Always," she confirmed. "I'm not going anywhere, Luca. This life, complicated and dangerous as it is, it's ours, and I wouldn't have it any other way." He cupped her face in his hands, thumbs brushing her cheekbones. "I never thought I'd find this again. After Isabella,
I closed myself off, convinced myself that love was a weakness I couldn't afford. And now? Now I know better. Love isn't weakness, it's strength. You make me stronger, Amelia. You make me want to build something lasting, something more than just power and fear. She leaned into his touch, understanding the weight of his words. This man, who commanded an empire built on violence and control, was offering her his heart, scarred and healing, but wholly hers. Then let's build it together, she said softly. Day by day, no matter what comes. Luca's kiss was gentle, a contrast to the power she knew he wielded. When he pulled back, his eyes held a promise that made her heart race. Ti amo, mia vita. My life, my heart, my everything. Another knock echoed from inside, more urgent this time. The real world calling. But for this moment, in the morning sun, they were just a man and a woman in love, facing their future together. Go, Amelia said again, smiling. Your empire needs you. You need me more, he countered. But he was already moving toward the door. Yes, she agreed. But I have you. All of you. The rest can wait. I hope you like this story. Please share what's your favorite part of the story and where in the world you are watching from. Have a wonderful day.